Welcome to CRE Unplugged. I'm Ryan Elazari, and I'm with my wonderful, brilliant, and charming co-host, Nadine Ezzy. Nadine, how's it going? Did you recover
You guys would
from
think,
COVID?
yes, finally, after like 9 days, in the middle of me moving, by the way, I'm recovered from COVID. Talk about timing. Thank you for asking. Also, for those of you listening, every time Ryan gives me these delightful accolades and compliments, you would think that he's in trouble and trying to get himself out of the doghouse, but he's not. He's just genuinely this delightfully complimentary of me, and I'm so grateful for it. I am
Well,
healthy
they're
again
they're,
this
they're well
year.
deserving, so I have to let the audience know how I really feel.
Well, Ryan, thank you. And the sentiment is entirely mutual to you. Thank you. So I just want our listeners to know that Ryan is not always trying to dig himself out of the doghouse. But thank you, Ryan. Thank you.
Of course. And you have some exciting news. Do you want to share with the listeners what you've just launched?
Yes, I do. And thank you, Ryan. So myself and two of whom I consider to be some of the more brilliant voices on LinkedIn today, as it relates to AI and commercial real estate, and actually people rolling up their sleeves and learning how to use it. Topher Stevenson and Jonathan Buckaloo and I have launched what we call the CRE AI Studio, which is a learning platform dedicated entirely to folks learning how to leverage artificial intelligence within commercial real estate. So we're dropping weekly videos to our subscribers. We're already over 100 subscribers. We launched a week ago, the date of this recording. So we're very excited. We've got community in there answering Q&As. And it's off to the races. We were blown up. We had our first session live last week. Last week, I think is what's today, the 10th, so about a week ago. And it was completely electric. People were just asking questions left and right. Topher dropped his presentation, which he's been giving across the country. Normally, you'd have to pay a couple $1,000s to attend a conference to see it. And folks are energized. And the reason we did this, right, is for a reason that I think is growing to be a bit of a problem, right? Is people are becoming really anxious and overwhelmed about where to turn to learn artificial intelligence if their organization hasn't kind of already taken the helm in terms of educating their employees and rolling it out. And so what we've decided is to create an all-in-one place where we're going to be teaching everything in one place, right? So if you want to learn about differences between Claude and ChatGPT and Perplexity and other really great applications like GenSpark or Gamma, right? And then how to connect the bridge to use cases in brokerage or asset management, or legal privacy issues. It's all going to be in there. It's going to be interactive. It's community based. We're not calling it a course because AI is changing so darn fast. So it's a learning platform. And we're going to be pivoting as AI pivots. And so I'm very, very excited for that. So we're keeping our initial cohort small. Got a couple spots left. If folks want to join us, just go to creaistudio.com. But I'm very excited for this.
Yeah, I think what you guys are doing is great and it's very needed in this industry. I get calls all the time from people asking me like, "Hey, I don't want to be behind. Like, what should I be
Yeah.
doing with AI?" And I tell them that they just got to keep playing with the different platforms that are out there and go on YouTube. But now that you guys have this studio, I mean, I'm going to direct them there. I think it's really great what you guys are doing, and it kind of goes hand in hand with this book I've been reading called AI Driven Leader, and it
Mm-hmm.
talks about how you want AI as a thought partner. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of treating it like a tool, it like kind of positions it as you having it as a co-pilot. So it challenges your bias, your
Mm-hmm.
asks, insights of questions, and it brings
Mm-hmm.
blind spots to light. And it really helps you to go from data and making decisions lightning fast. And I think that's really great. And then, of course, something that you and I have always talked about is getting AI to do the routine tasks and then focus on strategy. Because at the end of the day, you want to, be more creative, focus on the strategy side. And I think, what you're probably providing with the studio is to give those type of co-piloting aspects for you to
Mm-hmm.
grow within your company and do a lot more uh, and be able to scale at a much higher clip.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you touched upon AI as a collaborator and not a tool, right? And I think that's where a lot of people fall short is that they just want to give it a task and have it go off and execute on that task perfectly. And you have to look at it as a collaborator, right? If you had somebody in your office that you were working with on a project and you were giving them instructions on how to do it, would you just give them two lines and expect them to come back and deliver it exactly as you want? No, you would take the time to explain to them what your objectives are, what your expectations are in terms of the deliverable, right? How you want it for, I mean, all of that. So it's a mindset shift, even though it presents like a tool, right? Like software that we're accustomed to, its capacity to perform is of some of our actual colleagues in certain roles. And so we need to treat it as such in terms of training it and working with it. And so we're doing a lot of that in the studio. And I'm really glad that you raised that as well with that book. I'm going to have to check that out, by the way. And I'm glad you raised that.
Yeah, it's an easy read, so I highly recommend it.
All right. Well, a little bit of a pivot from AI to something that everybody seems to be talking about in the headlines, which is retail. Everybody's saying that retail is dead. But before we dive into today's conversation and with today's guest, who we're very excited to have, we're going to clear something up. Retail is not dead. In fact, she's having a little bit of a glow up.
Exactly. While everyone's been busy proclaiming the death of brick and mortar, retail centers have quietly hit their highest occupancy rate in real years. But the kind of retail that's thriving, it's not about stuff. It's about story, sweat, and social connection.
And nobody, and I mean nobody, has a sharper eye on this shift than Beth Azor. She's a retail real estate powerhouse who has been canvassing, leasing, and trend spotting long before Instagram and TikTok made it cool.
And I'm really excited because we're going to really dive into MedTail to competitive socializing to the rise of fitness and urgent care in strip centers. And Beth is really good at seeing where the puck is going,
Mm-hmm.
especially with her advisory group. So she's really going to be able to talk about all the myths that's out there and have us look into what's really happening in the industry.
I
So,
can't wait.
Nadine, should we get to it?
Let's get to it, Ryan.
And with that, I'm excited to introduce Beth Azor, CEO of Azor Advisory Services, also known as the Canvassing Queen. Beth, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Ryan and Nadine. I'm excited to be here.
We're
Well,
thrilled.
this is going to be a lot of fun, and we're so happy to have you. I really would like to start by saying something that you preach to the choir. You're saying that retail is not dead. So let's bust this myth, right? What is the most misunderstood narrative you keep hearing about retail real estate?
So, what I hear continually with probably mostly non-CRE people is that Amazon and e-commerce and online retail is 90% of the $5.4 trillion of retail sales in the domestic US. And that is not the fact. In fact, it's about 17%, which as a retail investor, people, I have friends that'll say, why are you investing in shopping centers? Isn't retail dead? No, it's not. But we all know that media and headlines, they like the doom and gloom. So the one part of retail that is dying is the mall business because greedy developers, you know, I'm a developer or I have been a developer, but there are greedy developers. And when you need one of a product, they overbuild and they do 100 times what they need. So for example, in South Florida, we have about 21 malls. For our population, we need about 8.
Wow.
So you'll continue to see the mall business or the malls start to repurpose themselves. For example, in North Carolina, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Fortnite. It's this hot video game that a lot of people play. I have 2 sons. So Fortnite bought a mall in North Carolina and created their headquarters. You'll see hospitals take over malls. You'll see a lot of multifamily development. that will repurpose malls. So that part of our business, I think, is dying because it was overbuilt.
Mhm.
But the properties I invest in, which is necessity-based retail, that is not dying. When I first got into the business, our shopping centers were filled with merchandise, and that is the piece that Amazon took. We used to have 4 shoe stores, 4 pet stores, 4 bookstores, 4 linen stores. If you have a merchandise product, 4 electronic stores, 4 toy stores, that has hurt the industry and hurt shopping centers, because if you want to buy linens, you can buy them more easily on Amazon than, going to 3 different linen stores. So, but necessity-based retail, which is what I invest in, which is, and I know we'll talk about the 5 F words later, but it's the things you can't get on the internet. You can't get on Amazon. You can't get your hair cut on Amazon. You can't get your nails done on Amazon. You can't have a community-based meal, with your neighborhoods on Amazon. So retail's not dead. Bad retail's dead, but retail as a whole, if the predictors have said that before COVID, they used to say that Amazon or e-commerce would take about 30% of retail sales. And like I said, we're at 17. So I'm good if I have 70% of the consumer's disposable income. I'm good with that. And then one last thing about this, you guys are too young, but in the 60s, they had these things called catalogs, Sears catalogs, where you'd get these big fat books mailed to your house, and the kids would we didn't have yellow stickies back then either, but they would peel back the corners for the gifts that they want their parents to order from a catalog for Christmas. That was back then e-commerce, and that took up 10% of retail sales, the catalog business. So we're just changing, we're just doing different things, and life, that's what life's about.
I very fondly remember that. Yeah, I very fondly remember the J.C. Penney catalog in my younger years, but the very thick J.C. Penney catalog. Now, while it didn't sell houses the way the Sears catalog did in the decades before, I fondly remember the thickness and the heft of, right? And you just were like, oh, this matters. This is, yes, absolutely. And I love that you just tied that into that. It's just changing, right? The means of how we're delivering these things is just changing. So, Beth, fantastic tee up to this conversation. I want to go just a little bit deeper. So we talked about the e-com diehards, right? How do you explain to people today, especially those e-com diehards, the real story behind retail occupancy and sales today? I think you kind of scratched the surface a little bit about necessity-based retail, but to these e-com diehards, if you want to tell them a story, the real story about retail occupancy and sales today, how are you going to play that out to them?
Yeah. So rent is a function of sales. So if tenants do well, they can pay higher rents. So they want to be in markets where their audience is, and e-commerce is helping that. So there are stories and statistics that when Neiman Marcus or TJ Maxx or Starbucks puts a store in a neighborhood, the e-commerce sales go up significantly. So they're going hand in hand, e-commerce and bricks and mortar. There were, back, I would say about 10 years ago, there was a slew of e-commerce only businesses, and like Wayfair, Bonobos, Warby Parker. Well, guess what? They've realized that they need bricks and mortar also, that to the CAC, the customer acquisition cost, is too great to only be on e-commerce. They need that billboard of a store. So e-commerce and bricks and mortar work hand in hand, and sales are what drive rents, which is what helps developers like us understand if they're projecting a certain sales per square foot in a store, we know what rent we can charge, and therefore keeping our occupancy as high as possible and having a profitable development.
I love the connection behind the connection of the dots, right? That it's not It doesn't have to be so binary and yes or no, or either or, but this correlation that you just explained between the two, right? Like a Starbucks or more of an experience-based retail going to a shopping center and the actual increase in e-commerce. This is the conversation we need to be having, and I'm so glad that we're having it.
Happy to be here.
Now, what you just brought up the five Fs. Why don't you share with us what you think are the five Fs that are driving tenant demand, and which one really surprises you?
Yeah. So I was giving a speech and I said, someone said, what's filling shopping centers today? And I literally pulled it right out of my butt. I was like, the five F words. And they're like, whoa, no, this is a family. No.
All right, that's all the time we have today.
Yeah, she's not just bringing one F word, she's bringing five, folks.
Exactly. Yeah. You didn't know there were five. So it's food and beverage. Obviously, it's the number one driver of shopping centers. When I first started in the business, no one put more than 10% of food and beverage in their properties. It was like a cap. Once you got to 10, you stopped. Today, it's 50. Today, the food and beverage are the anchors of the properties. They drive the most traffic. So food and beverage is the first one. Fitness is the second one. So fitness, the sweat hounds, the pure bars, the cryo bars, the IV, anything fitness or health related, like from a fitness perspective. Furry friends. So that means daycare for the dogs or the cats. That means grooming. That means gifts. And now what I'm hearing in my circles is that the vet part of the business, the medical part, is going to start splintering, and you're going to have chiropractor for dogs or podiatry for dogs or your animals. So it's such a big business since COVID. So many people got animals. So furry friends, fun, axe throwing, pickleball, putt-putt, top golf, anything, for the bounce house places, you name it, for the kids and for the younger adults also, which I know we're going to talk about. And then lastly, go with me here, physicians. It's kind of an F word, phonetically.
It's an F sound.
Yeah. So MedTail is all the rage. We're all, a lot of my shopping centers, I have urgent cares, I have MRI places, Botox. So lots of things MedTail related. So those are the uses that are filling up the majority of the shopping centers. It's not merchandise.
Beth, you mentioned fitness, right? Like the sweat based, the wellness based, all of that, right? And I see them all, right? What, in your opinion, is driving that shift specifically to that particular F? And what does it mean for how we are thinking about shopping centers?
So I think we're thinking about shopping centers as a 24/7, right? We can eat breakfast there. We can work out there before we eat breakfast. We can meet friends there. We can take our kids to tutoring and then take a Pure Barre class in the afternoon. We can take out pizza. While our kids are in tutoring, we can get our nails done. So I think that shopping centers are becoming something that you can build your whole life around and your family's life around. If the shopping center owner is doing a good job with their leasing. I mean, if you're filling your shopping center with a bunch of vape stores because they pay the highest rent, that mom is not going to go do a Pure Barre. Pure Barre won't go there. So you have to be very careful with your tenant mix. So, but the things you have to watch out for, though, is you have to watch out for parking, because you can't have 5 fitness uses. Then you won't get Starbucks because there's not going to be enough parking. So you have to, kind of navigate and straddle the uses and the use needs. Like when I talk to fitness users, I'm always saying, how many people are going to be in your class? What's your peak time? Because if they're going to say, oh, we're going to have 40 people in a class and our peak time is lunchtime, because now with a lot of people working at home, it's not just the 6 to 9 in the morning and the 4 to 9 at night. Now people are working out during the day because a lot of them are still working from home or they're working in the gig economy. So you have to be, again, as a landlord, very careful that you understand how many people in the class, because if I have a ton of restaurants at my properties, food and beverage, and half of them do an unbelievable lunch business. If I brought in a Pure Bar with 40 people in the class, my other tenants would kill me because those cars sit there for an hour. They're not an in and out thing. So you have to be very sensitive to, you want the mom who drops off the kid at tutoring and then gets her nails done or takes a Pure Bar class. I want that mom, but I don't want it if it impacts negatively my other tenants' whopping sales that I already have.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, I'm really glad you're bringing this all up because we had Lisa Picard on our podcast about a year ago, and she was talking about what needed to get back to people coming to the office was these life experiences and to have that being built in a mixed use space with the office tenants above. So it really captures what you're basically saying, which is people now, if they want to go back to the office, they need to be able to handle their life errands. Just like with retail chains now and shopping centers, they need to be able to do their life errands and do the things that they need for their families in order for them to want to go every day.
Absolutely.
Competitive socializing is a term that you've used a lot, and I've recently come across it. What does that look like on the ground on the retail centers, and why is it working?
Yeah, so I didn't create it. JLL created it. They did a report probably 6 years ago now, where they started to see that the young adult, Gen Z, I get confused with all of these gens, but whatever it was, let's say, high school, college, and young adult age were not drinking as much. And now you're seeing that in the media every week. There was an article last week in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, everyone's talking about it. So if you are that age group in the 20s, 20s, early 30s, and you're not a drinker, but you still want to go out and hang out with your friends, and you're not really welcome in bars, right? The bar, they're pushing the drinks on you. You're not going to sit around with a water bottle in a bar. They're going to want you to get the heck out. So retail brands are jumping on this craze, and they're realizing that and this JLL report talked about competitive socializing, where you've got, we talked about it earlier when we said the F in fun, the axe throwing, the dog parks with the cornhole thing, the putt-putt, a bunch of putt-putts, the pickleballs and the dog parks together, the escape rooms. So all of these businesses have been created in the last 10 years I think to come out of what can we provide this generation who are not drinkers, but still want to get together and socialize. And they don't just want to stand there and have a drink. They want to do something else. And this competitive socializing, I read the JLL report and I was like, yes, because I have two young adult sons, and they're not drinkers, but they do like to go out and hang out with their friends, and they do escape rooms and they do stuff like that. So very, very, I loved that report that they did, and I found it to be so true. And they were ahead of the game and I started talking about this in speeches and presentations years and years ago. And now finally, it's in the media about this non-drinking thing.
There's no sub menu. You go out to a bar, you see, or a restaurant. It's pretty tough to find a menu that doesn't have a mocktail section on it these days, right? As well. And these, these places like the pickleball places and Putt Shack and all that, they still have a bar, but you can go there and still have a good time and don't have to drink, right? So I think it's the inclusivity of more people that I think is just so attractive, right? As well, and I'm elated to see it, especially in the and like you, I can't keep track of the name. I don't even know what generation I am, Beth. I don't know. I can't keep up with it anyway. But so you had mentioned MedTail earlier on, right? And you said that hospitals are out and MedTail is in. And you and we talked about this a little bit on our previous call. I don't know if you want to say the good fortune, but I got very sick in Southern Florida on my last visit, not far from you. And I had to visit in one of the fabulous urgent care centers, I think in Davie, where you live. And I can't believe I had an amazing experience. I had an amazing experience at an urgent care in a shopping center. So tell us, what is happening here and how are developers adjusting?
So the average, I actually looked this up today because I wanted to get my facts straight. So a 2-story average hospital with like 100 to 150 beds costs about $200 million. And a
Wow.
large hospital with 500 beds costs 250 to a billion.
To construct?
So, to construct.
Okay.
So that ain't happening. They're not constructing a lot of hospitals anymore.
Definitely not.
Because of construction costs. And I don't believe construction costs are coming down ever.
Mm-hmm.
Labor with immigration, I mean, tariffs, like, anyone that's waiting around for construction costs to come down, I think they're going to be waiting. So because hospitals are not being built like they were 20 years ago, I mean, we haven't built a new hospital in South Florida. The last one we built was in Homestead, I believe, and it was, there was a smaller one built in Davie, but it was in conjunction with Nova, with the university, but it's tiny. If it has 100 beds, and it was really part of the medical school. It wasn't a separate standalone hospital. So it's been decades since we've gotten one, and we're a pretty, we got 300,000 people since COVID that came into Florida. If you're going to build a hospital, you're going to build it in South Florida. Not happening. So what these hospital administrators are doing, and the boards and the facility directors, is they're saying, what can we remove from our current hospitals that is not emergent, right? Having to do with emergency trauma, et cetera. Okay, let's move gynecology out. Let's move MRIs out. Let's move, the non-emergent issues. Now, that says, well, that's weird. They're building all these urgent cares. They're also doing that. It's non-trauma urgent cares because the hospitals need to have room for traumas. So my son, who was here last month from California, went to an urgent care and they said, you need to go to the hospital. Luckily, he was fine, but they take care of, the earaches in the middle of the night. You have a kid, he's 2 years old, you're going to go to the urgent care that's open instead of the hospital. So, so they're trying to move out the non-emergent and non-trauma pieces of the hospitals so that they can continue to provide the services and the help to the sick people, but not have the things that are taking up space in the hospitals that are not emergency based. And we are the beneficiaries of this, certainly. And I would say you're going to see some potential expansions with malls, the ones that are not working, and probably office buildings. Like I was in Cleveland 3 years ago. I had a consulting assignment from an office building owner who had 3 vacant office buildings. And they hired me to see if there was anyone in Cleveland that could lease their office space. So I prospected, or I visited 47 office buildings in Cleveland and the surrounding areas. 46 of them were 80% vacant. There was one that was 100% full and thriving, and it was a medical office building. So I think we'll see the office asset class also benefit from the dilution or the moving out of the non-emergent departments of hospitals so that the hospitals can be what they're supposed to be, for emergency situations.
Also helps with the patients who don't have to wait a long time to take care of something that's actually, a serious condition in the middle of the night.
The blood labs all these things that you used to go to mammograms, you used to go to the hospitals.
Yeah.
You don't go to the hospitals for those things anymore.
Yeah. To your point, Ryan, it reduces that friction of being able to access care. And I don't know if it's just with the urgent cares that I've gone to, but there is this heightened focus on patient experience. I was about to say customer experience, right? Or tenant experience, but right. Patient experience. And we talk about this so much on the podcast. And I mean, it's no secret that our industry now is really shifting towards one of focusing on the experience of the occupants. And I'm elated to see that carry through in terms of the provision of medical care as well. So yeah.
Right. For sure. They're becoming hospitality, right? The hospitals and the urgent cares, as they should.
As they should. Amen.
You were talking about how construction cost is putting pressure on developers, interest rates, that's obvious. You also got cap rates that, aren't really advancing more development. So how are developers becoming more creative? And can you share an example with one that you said, wow, that's really genius what they did there?
So I know at least 3 or 4 developers that are starting to buy opcos, operating companies, which I think is genius because they're becoming urgent care franchisees or tire company franchisees or burgers or coffees. And basically they're creating their own client list to develop for. And they can, I don't, the word manipulate sounds in a negative term, but they can manipulate the rents because they're their own client. So they can build for the OpCo, sign a lease as the OpCo, and then they can sell it to a triple net investor. And if the triple net investor doesn't want to pay the cap rate that the OpCo wants him to pay, OpCo/developer, they can increase the rent to get the cap rate.
Right.
It's really brilliant. I'm sorry. Yeah. It's whether it's brilliant.
So, so I see this as a huge trend and not many people are talking about it, but developers are really out of business. They better figure out a way to develop or maybe to start developing different asset classes than retail, because again, rent is a function of sales and there's only so many sales. You're not going to say in small town USA, you're going to do $5 million as a coffee shop. So there is a ceiling and it doesn't jive with the construction costs and the interest rates. So what else can you do? So I know, like I said, at least 4 people that were primarily developers for retailers that are now becoming the retailer and being the developer for themselves. It's fascinating. Fascinating.
I'm going to be thinking about this one for a long time, Beth, for a long time. And you're right. Not a lot of people are talking about it. So I'm so glad you raised it here on CRE Unplugged.
I just want to say you can't just like wake up in the morning and say, oh, this is a great idea, I'm going to do it. You really have to understand the ins and outs of an operating business. It's not something that can be done overnight.
Right. But I can tell you that. So I have 4 friends that are doing this. The first person who started it is now on his 4th concept. Because once you figure it out, it's formulaic. Now you need to have good operating partners, which hopefully he is, because, but all of them start out being the operating partner. They're like in there changing tires. So
Wow.
I don't think they'll, as they roll out, they'll be changing. And I think that that's what they should do. If you're going to buy a company and be an operator, you better know what the heck you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But it's very interesting that the person who in my world started this, where it grabbed my attention, is now on his fourth concept.
Wow. Wow. So Beth, you alluded to vape stores earlier in our conversation, which triggered in my mind another adjacent industry to that, which is the cannabis dispensaries. They've completely exploded across the United States over the last however many years with the legalization of recreational marijuana in a number of states. Some of them are as fancy looking as an Apple store on the inside. So I'm very curious, Beth, in your opinion, are we in a bubble? What is the impact of these dispensaries on retail? Is it good? Is it bad? I would just love your take on it.
Yeah. So I've never leased to one, and I would not lease to one. I have bought shopping centers that have had vape stores, and I don't like that, because even though, I think that this topic absolutely is impacted by the laws of the states.
Mm-hmm.
And they vary, and the laws of the counties and the cities.
Mm-hmm.
I've had them call me and offer triple the rents.
Wow.
And then I've gone, and at one point it was with a shopping center that I kind of needed some tenants. And then I said, well, let me go look at your other locations. And it wasn't something I wanted in my property. And they did look like Apple stores, but unfortunately, it was just not something that I wanted to be next to my tutoring facilities.
Sure.
So I think the bubble's starting to burst, though, because of the laws. It was crazy, I would say, 7 years ago. In the last 2 or 3 years in South Florida, and I only know South Florida, it's really died down. I don't really know why. I really just think a lot of it has to do with the laws. I was with a friend in Denver who's in warehouse, and she said that, they couldn't keep the warehouse vacancy, that cannabis would just take up any kind of warehouse vacancy that existed. And now laws changed, and now there's so much product on it because of the industry. So I think it's so based on laws and legislature and, the banking. I remember at the time that I considered it for a fraction of a second. One of the things that they said is they had to have a full-time security guard outside of the store because cash, could only do cash. I'm like, oh, no.
Yes. Yeah. You're like, no.
I was like, I don't like that. So, so I think it's going to level out. I think that there are definitely landlords that will lease to them.
Yeah.
Because, in the situation where I was looking, I had a national tenant, and I called that national tenant. It was an apparel store. And I said, I'm considering this. And they're like, no, you can't. Like I said, well, there's other big tenants that are agreeing to it. He goes, we're not.
Yeah.
So I just like things that are easy. So I don't,
No,
not for
sure.
me. But I know a lot of people are exploring it and doing it. And
yeah. I can at least opine on Boston, where I most recently live, and I think it's certainly peaked, right? I remember it was almost like one, you would hear of a new one opening, you're like, oh my gosh, a new one. For a moment it was only like one, and then there's a second one, and now they're starting to close, because it was like Dunkin' Donuts. There's one on every corner, and so now you're starting to see them close. And so I was just curious on the impact of retail on that. So, okay, enough on weed. Let's talk about let's talk about
we talked about drinking.
Yeah, okay, weed. Enough about drinking, weed, food.
What these millennials do, not the Gen Zers.
But that, that is why they're saying that that generation is not drinking.
Yeah.
because of
They're
cannabis.
doing gummies. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, gummies are huge.
it's called being California sober, from what I
Right.
understand, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah,
Competitive socializing in California sober.
like Willie Nelson, you're California sober, so to say. Exactly. We could have a whole nother podcast on that,
Yeah.
but we're not. Okay. So, Beth, you've said that middle managers are on LinkedIn, but decision makers are on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. So, why do you think that is? Because I know a lot of people think that they're going to find the decision makers on LinkedIn in our industry. So, why do you think that is? And how should real estate pros think differently about where and how they show up online?
Yeah. And this is my opinion. So there's no stats on this. This has just been my own experience. I was on LinkedIn for 8 years and I got a lot of awareness. I mean, I'm still on LinkedIn, but the time that I joined X, I had been on LinkedIn for about 8 years. And I didn't get a lot of business from it. And then I got on X, and within 90 days, I made significant amount, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Wow.
And it blew me away. And I started evaluating, why is this happening? And I came to the conclusion that there were decision makers on X that were not on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, it's like the middle, for me, my clients are shopping center owners who want to hire me to consult, or leasing directors who want me to train their leasing teams. And the leasing directors for sure are on LinkedIn, and many of them are posting their projects, just sold, just leased, maybe are doing some discussions about difficult negotiations or whatever. And some of them don't, post at all, right? They're lurkers. On Twitter or on X, it's the shopping center owners. So and why is that? I think, I don't have any stats on this. This is just my, what I think. But I think that LinkedIn is kind of an investment. You got to like spend some time. People are, when they are posting on LinkedIn, the grammar's correct. They're throwing it through Chat GPT. Like none of that happens on X. There's no capitalizations, there's no punctuations, and it's fast. And I think that the guy who owns 3 little shopping centers in Midwest US is scrolling through, and they're looking for some assistance or help. The community on X also for CRE is amazing. I've literally gotten 2 masters since I've been on X for 3 years, just on the information that I've learned from my peers, because just people go, it's short and quick and to the point, but it's deep, and they commit when they start commenting on things. And I've learned so much. So I think that the owner of 3 shopping centers is not spending a lot of time on LinkedIn trying to scroll through very long posts that people post. So I think it's time, energy, and the community is just different. I don't see a community on LinkedIn like I do on X. I mean, to the point that there's been galas and meetups from a CRE community perspective. LinkedIn's been around from the CRE part so much longer than what's been happening on X, in my opinion, recently, and really from the start with the strip mall guy, Don Tepman, who is the one who got me on X. So I think it's community. I think it's time, it's efficiency. No one feels like you can just post one question on Twitter, and it's rarely that you're going to do that on LinkedIn. LinkedIn it's just different platforms. So there's no science. This is just my conjecture, and this is what I think. But I have it backed up with the money I've made on one platform versus the other.
Yeah, I remember being at an event and you shared that story, and that really blew my mind. And that was about 4 years ago. I'm thinking, has a lot changed since the Twitter of 4 or 5 years ago to compare to now?
Yeah, I think, smaller is always kind of better, right? When it grows and becomes larger, it gets diluted. So I made a lot of money the first 3 months. I've made money on Twitter, but on X, nothing like the first 90 days. So, but it's still my go-to platform. That's where I do most of my posting now, not really any of the other platforms. And I have a social media person who will repost things that I'll do on X to other platforms. But that's where I spend the majority of my time.
Yeah, I definitely share that sentiment. I think X definitely has a large impact to a small group of people who are very powerful in the industry. Which brings me to you're known as the canvassing queen. That's what you say on X. I know you've told this story many times before, but if you could share with the audience, how did the brand come to life, and what's the story behind the red wardrobe?
So the canvassing queen, I've coached and trained leasing agents for 39 years. I mean, or 37 years. I was with a company and we would hire kids out of college and I would coach and train them. And we coached and trained on canvassing. And I would speak at events and I would talk about canvassing. And my peers in the industry, I think people think when I get successful in it, when I'm making a lot of money, I no longer have to cold call or canvas, which I still canvas today. So I never understood that. And I would always try to debunk that when I would be on panels at shopping center conferences. So people used to tease me a lot about it. Oh, and one time I was walking up to a group of my peers that were probably ahead of me in business, maybe a little more senior in business. Oh, here she comes, the canvassing queen. And I said, oh, I love that. I need to get a crown. And I said, I'm going to start using that because that's great. And we trademarked it. And it is, 80% about what I talk about. And if I have 850 videos on YouTube, 800 of them are about canvassing. And it's what I think fills shopping centers, whether you lease them for a third party or whether you own them like myself. I'm going canvassing tomorrow. I have a girl that's shadowing me and her parents own some shopping centers. I said, we're going canvassing for your assets and mine. So I think it is a phenomenal tool in our business, in what I do. And I don't really care if anyone else does it or not. But lots of companies hire me to take their teams canvassing. So it's fun. I love it. And that's that. And then the red thing, we have a shopping center conference in August every year in Florida. It's like our Super Bowl. And it was always the week leading up to the FSU Miami game, the football game. And I'm a big FSU alumni supporter, started the Real Estate Foundation, very involved. And I thought it would be fun one year to just deck out in garnet and gold and put a Beat Miami button. And it was great because people would be up on panels, TJ Maxx and Starbucks and, Kimco, and they'd go, we don't care what Beth, I'd be in the audience of 500 people and people would be shouting out my name. FSU's going down. And I was this is great. I don't even have to be on the panel. I'm getting shouted out in front of 500 people. So I would do that. And then the game got moved to October. So it wasn't that week anymore. So I wasn't going to show up all of my, regalia at this conference if the game wasn't that weekend. So, so I just think I started wearing just garnet, maybe kind of representation. And then the garnet be turned to red. And it wasn't a thing I was doing until one day when I went to a conference and someone said, where's your red? And I went, oh. And then from that point on, I only wore red to conferences or speaking engagements because people were recognizing me like that. And now I'll be at ICSC in Vegas where there's 40,000 people and someone will come up and go, you're Beth, right? I go, yeah. She goes, someone told me to find you that you'd be in red. So it works.
It definitely works. And I think branding is so important in this day and age. How would you?
And I have my water cup that says You can
Oh,
see it. The
What's it say?
canvassing
Oh, the
queen.
canvassing
oh,
queen.
wow. I love it.
Beth, I did this for you in honor of you today. It doesn't say the canvassing queen, but I have my red for you today as well. So yeah,
And then I always get red straws too.
I love
So
it. I love it.
I feel so out of place. I feel like I should have had some red on me. But what I wanted to say is for the younger generation who are trying to get into the real estate industry, how important is it for them to try to create some type of brand name for themselves so they can be successful in this market?
well, I always say it's not who you know, it's who knows you. So these young people can go, they can know the 500 top retailers that are expanding. But if they don't know who they are, if those retailers don't know who that young person is, they're not going to do business with them. So it's super important. But branding could just be sending handwritten thank you notes. You know, be the young person who sends a handwritten thank you note after every meeting and put something in it that was meaningful that happened in the meeting or something that was said by the person in the meeting. Branding could be before you walk into a meeting, you do some research on the person and find out, oh, they like dogs, or oh, they went to my college, or oh, they play pickleball. And be that person who's in a meeting that did some research before you got there's all kind. You don't have to wear clothes, right? I had a young man that was a Duke basketball player and he lived in Charleston. And he goes, what could I do? What do you think I could do? And I said, well, you could wear a bow tie because you're from Charleston and you're 6'8", like you would stand out. And he loved that idea and he became known as the bow tie guy. So you can do all kinds of things, but you could also be the person that returns every phone call 24 hours. I mean, unfortunately in our industry, you could set yourself apart by just doing the job better.
This is something actually that I did very young. You know, my career started 20 years ago. And when you start out, you don't have a lot of skill set. You don't have a lot of experience. And I would do just that. I would research people ad nauseum before going into meetings. And I'm like, well, what I can do is learn them as a human being and try to forge a human connection. I can do that. Right. And I would go and be like, oh, hey, you know, whether they're dog, whatever, I see you're a fan of this or that. And at least you can form that connection that can, at least for the time being, kind of compensate for whatever lack of experience you might have as a professional and at least get you some credibility or foot in the door with that person. So fantastic advice. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and people go, oh, that's stalking. Like, you know, I got a letter once from the head of real estate from Floor and Decor. And he said, I met with one of your students today. It wasn't a student, but, you know, it was a client who had me train their team. Met with one of your students today. I was so impressed. She knew about my love for dogs, bulldogs and Georgia bulldogs. She brought me a gift card from PetSmart. I couldn't accept it, but I loved the thought. And I'll never forget how, you know, what time she took before the meeting, before she met with me. I'll never forget that. You know, so bravo. So, you know,
Making an impact, making a lasting impression.
Yeah, my son starts caddying this morning in Pinehurst, North Carolina, and he sent me the list of the 3 guys that he's caddying for. And I said, you should look them up on social and maybe you'll find out that they're, you know, LA Dodgers fans like you are. He's like, oh, mom, like I think he's like freaked out by my suggestion, but I said, you want to get good tips. If you know the guy's an LA Dodgers fan and you can talk to him about, you know, O'Shea Ohtani. He's like, so I don't think he did it, but I'm going to talk to him more about that tonight.
Yeah, Pinehurst isn't a bad place to be caddying. Let us know how it goes.
He's very, very excited. He moved there in June to get this job, and today's his first day on the job.
Good for him. Congratulations to him. That's awesome.
Excited.
So Beth, I want to keep you here and talk to you all day long. I mean, we could, and I'm sure Ryan would agree, but sadly we do need to wrap up this interview. But before we let you go, when you're not talking rent rolls or retail trends, you know, who is Beth behind the canvassing queen? What are you watching? What are you reading? What are you loving right now? That's just lighting you up, Beth?
Well, I'm a huge football fan. So this week was football, football, football. Florida State. We're big LA Rams fans. My son lives in LA. He has a podcast. So I watch his podcast religiously every week called the
Oh,
Escape Pod Podcast. It's about superhero movies.
oh,
I like shows like The Diplomat with Kerry Russell. Love that.
obsessed. Season 3 is coming out soon. Are you ready?
The fact that she doesn't comb her hair, like I just love her.
I feel validated. I feel validated and seen. Yes, okay.
So love that show. Can't wait till it comes out again. And then I am walking the Camino de Santiago in May and June, which is 500 miles in the north of France to the north of Spain. So I'm reading I'm reading books about people that walked it and watching a lot of videos. So I'm kind of obsessed with getting prepared for that trip. So a lot of my attention is on that these days.
Wow. Yeah, I
That's
don't know
really
if you
amazing.
I know, I know. I know some people that have walked it. I hear it's a life-changing experience. And so we'll have to have you back, Beth, afterwards to hear all about it. And maybe if
And
you
then
pick
the
up.
other show that I love is the Sticks, the golf show. Have you seen
Oh,
that?
what a great show, Beth. I love it.
Yeah. So
So good.
I have my son with the podcast and my golfer son. So my golfer son and I we stream it and watch it FaceTime together. So that show was fabulous.
Yeah, what a great end to the season, and I can't wait for season two. I think they're gonna have Owen Wilson probably play in the circuit. I think that's
Yeah.
what's gonna be next.
Yeah, and I'm going to the Ryder Cup with my son at the end of this month in New
Oh,
York, Beth Page. So we're very excited. So my sons have a life that I get to live vicariously with them and through them with their passions. I went to the Mission Impossible premiere with my other son back in May. So I'm just loving life. Life is great. And thankfully investing in shopping centers has helped me have the wonderful life that I have.
That's really beautiful.
that's really, really lovely, Beth. I'm going to have to check out Sticks now as
Yes.
well. So thank you both. But that's really lovely. Beth Azar, you are a delight and a gift to the commercial real estate industry. We thank you for joining us on commercial or CRE Unplugged today and for your time. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Nadine
Beth.
and Ryan. Thanks for having me.
All right. So, folks, please be sure to stay tuned for our recap after this word from our sponsor.
Hey there, CRE Unplugged fam. We would like to give a huge shout out to our sponsor, the Game Changers over at Hilo, the customer experience platform for buildings that's turning heads in the real estate world.
That's right. Can we talk about how Hilo is transforming the way we manage properties and create unforgettable experiences? Ryan, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about Hilo?
Well, Nadine, it's all about reducing friction in property management. Hilo is like the magic wand that makes everything seamless and efficient. Say goodbye to those time-consuming tasks and hello to streamlined operations and communications.
Efficiency is crucial, but what about personalized experiences? Hilo takes it to the next level with a vision to tailor each interaction to the needs and preferences of its customers.
And let's not forget the community aspect. Hilo builds vibrant, connected communities. It's fostering a sense of belonging and togetherness.
Now, here's something that truly sets Hilo apart: their commitment to advancing ESG initiatives. They're not just about buildings, they're about making a positive impact on the environment. That's a win-win for everyone.
So, to our listeners out there, if you're ready to elevate your properties, digitize and enhance customer experience, and maximize satisfaction, Hilo is the answer. Please visit hiloapp.com for more information. That's hiloapp.com.
What a great conversation with Beth Azor. I learned more about retail in that 50 minutes than I think I have in my entire career in commercial real estate. And I got to tell you, my biggest takeaway, right, which really can honestly hold true, Ryan, for almost any topic, is that headlines and media always want to sensationalize everything and just reduce it to black and white, some type of black and white declaration with retail is dead. And Beth showed us that the truth is always in the details, right? And while merchandise or commodity-based retail might be taking a hit due to e-commerce, right? Lifestyle retail is alive and well, right? And this is where she was talking about fitness and physicians and MedTail and all of that.
Yeah, and I think she laid it out perfectly by saying 17% of business is being taken from e-commerce.
Hmm.
So if you thought it was 50% or even 60%, you're mistaken. So I would look at the stats before making judgments that aren't really there. And what I really love about Beth is she's still canvassing and
Hmm.
she's still talking about how her success is going out there, canvassing, seeing what the market is like. And at the end of the day, I think she lays out the fact that consistency beats talent when it comes to leasing. So getting out there every day, canvassing the market, even if it's uncomfortable, because I think that's the way to your success.
Amen to that. Honestly, our last two guests, Beth and then in Casey before that, I think showed us that success can lie in going back to the basics a lot, with Beth and retail, in that she's still out there canvassing. She's hired to teach brokers all the time about her success. And a big cornerstone of that lies in just canvassing and talking to people and walking the neighborhoods and knocking on those doors. And I, for one, love that. And I'm here for it in just kind of bringing back the basics that have always worked in this industry. And she's not afraid. She's not afraid to kind of go against, others that might be trying to kind of innovate in other ways or do away with canvassing and rely heavily on technology. I'm going to be really thinking a lot about how in my own business, in my own professional life, I might be able to go back to the basics a bit and just with consistency and persistence, really drive forward. She's going to be having me thinking about that for a while.
Yeah, yeah, and I also love the fact that she's got this brand, and whenever you see red, you think about her. You think about the canvassing queen, you're thinking about her. Just canvassing in general has now become like her brand, her trademark. And it got me to really thinking about how can I brand myself when I go to these events and conferences? Should I be wearing something? Should I put a pin on? Should I be wearing a very ostentatious hat? Like I'm trying to think of other ways for people to then be able to say, oh, that's Ryan over there, because I think it's so brilliant how she's able to market herself with just a simple color.
And I love, what I love about the Canvassing Queen story and how that was born is it was born out of some other guy being snarky.
Yeah.
She was walking up to a group of guys at an event. And he's like, "Oh, here comes the Canvassing Queen," and she owned it. She leaned into it. She owned it, and she's like, "You know what? You're right. I am the Canvassing Queen." And she even went so far as to trademark it. And amen to that, Beth. Okay, so if there's any time if you ever want to hear a story about somebody turning, snarkiness into power, there's one right there with Beth Azor.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more, Nadine. Well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you again to Beth Azor, CEO of Azor Advisory Services. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts.
And as always, friends, if you have any questions at all that you want us to answer on air, you can always email us at info@creunplugged.com or reach out to us through our website, www.creunplugged.com. See you next time. And until then, keep your convos real and unplugged.